The Basic Education Department has slammed media reports that grade 4s will learn about masturbation in a new curriculum. The new life orientation textbooks will be rolled out next year. The department says the subject material does not cover this matter and that the reports were misleading.
No, we distance ourselves from the article because the article is not telling the truth. We are sensitive to the age of grade 4s. We will not expose them to inappropriate content. The work that we do on sexuality education for grade 4s in particular is what is given to us and guided by UNESCO, who have conducted research around the world in terms of what we should be teaching grade 4. So the topics that are being mentioned in that article are not in the textbook that is going to be used in 2020.
So the Basic Education Department spokesperson Elijah Mhlanga joins us now in the studio for more. Very good evening to you. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us. So let's first start with what is particularly disappointing you about the report?
Well, there are two key things. The first one is that the journalist has conflated two different issues on that article. The one is about the new curriculum content for life orientation, and the other one is the reports of the ministerial task team which examined our textbooks for inclusivity and diversity in terms of content, and he put those things together in one story, thus causing untold confusion, and those issues should not.
So there's life orientation, but is there in that sexual education? Was that matter ever brought up?
What he was trying to write about is the new content for curriculum for grade 4, where he says incorrectly so that we will be teaching about masturbation in grade 4. That's wrong. It's not even in grade 5. It's not even in grade 6 for that matter. It only starts.
How did this confusion arise?
I don't know. I don't know what process was following to compile the story. We are also as equally concerned because it was on the front page and then there was a huge spread, I think on page 5 or something like that. And it quoted people out of context. Even those people that he's quoting there, some of them have told us that he is quoting them out of context. It was not what they thought he was writing about. So there was a conversation
with the Director General, Mr. Matanzima Mweli.
Yes.
What was that about?
He was talking about the other issue of the ministerial task team, which has conducted a survey of our textbooks to check if they are discriminatory in any way, whether on the basis of sexual orientation, race, ethnic, or any other form of prejudice that might be contained in our textbooks. And that task team has put together a set of recommendations which we are now implementing to try fix the content of our textbooks to make sure that they are fully representative of society as we have it today.
I asked this question because the Sunday Times, whom we did invite on, were unable to say they stand by their story.
How many times have you seen a newspaper saying they stand by their story and then they apologize later?
So you anticipate that they're going to have to retract what they said?
Well, we are going to have to take the steps that we need to take.
And which is what?
Well, we'll complain. We start with the oppressed ombud and we take our matter there because he's just caused a lot of confusion and he didn't do justice to his readers and the South African public in general. So he's just, all that he has been able to do through the newspaper is to cause confusion and diverting from the real issue. In fact, people don't even know what we are talking about now because there are two issues that he has brought together. And those issues, yes, they are related because all of it is got to do with curriculum, content, but they are being dealt with by separate teams.
Two different subjects. So it's connected in the sense it's got to do with curriculum, but they're two very different subjects and two very different approaches. That's what you're saying.
Yes.
Now, you also mentioned UNESCO. Take us through that. How does it converge, and does it in any way speak to that issue of sexual education and the approach to it?
Yes. What UNESCO does is to provide guidelines on what to teach and where to teach and what we should be putting in our textbooks in terms of the content that we should be using in our schools to teach our learners in terms of sex and sexuality education. So we use those guidelines, and those guidelines are evidence-based, which means they've interacted with learners right across the world. So there's a particular standard and understanding of what it is that learners...
What is that standard and understanding? And when we talk about people in primary school, and you say as educators, you want them to understand their environment, and that environment would include obviously interaction between boys and girls, and some of them are sexualized. Would it at any point include them being made aware of such a phenomena as masturbation?
At the right time, not in grade 4.
So you're saying it's about the grade. That's what you'd like to emphasize. That there's no way.
That's what we're disputing, because if you listen to the comments that people have been making today and even yesterday after reading the article, the concern was, do you think children at this age are ready to listen to content like this? And we are saying, yes, they are not, because we are not doing that either. It's just the article that is misleading you into thinking that we are doing that. So we are not doing that.
What would you then consider the appropriate age to then start talking about this?
Well, in terms of the outline of the content that we have, and it only starts in grade 7, because that's when it's puberty stage and you're feeling your body starting to change and you're noticing some differences about you that you need to start to understand. So it's at that point when the conversation happens. But the first prize is that it should happen at home. The first conversation should happen at home. Parents should not wait for school to teach their children about sex and sexuality. It is them who have the primary responsibility.
So instances where children are a little bit more advanced, and I know I'm using terminology some may be critical of, but who are a little bit more explorative, who've been taught, whether wittingly or unwittingly, about sex and interaction between men and women, children who are already sexualized or aware of their genetic disposition. What do you do then? Do teachers step in and take up the cudgels to say, seeing you're already talking about this, let us teach you the proper way of talking about it?
Of course, that's the responsibility of a teacher to mediate and make sure that...
Because you say it starts at home, but I'm just asking, what happens then in the school environment?
They would have to intervene. That's what I'm saying. The teacher's responsibility is to mediate, to make sure that information is not used out of context, information is not abused. It must be conveyed and imparted at the right time, in the right place, taking into account the age appropriateness of whatever you're saying.
So what happens then if it happens in primary school and somebody who's in grade 4? If we're hearing stories of young learners who are 9 years old already falling pregnant, then what happens? Does the teacher avoid having the discussion?
You see, there's a difference between an incident, because what you're asking is an incident. How should a teacher handle that particular incident? Then the circumstances will have to be taken into account. How do you handle it? And how does the teacher get to know that this learner is aware of this? Is she raising her hand inside the classroom and just saying it out to everyone while they're listening, or the child is approaching the teacher as an adult to try whisper to them what's happening to them, what they want to talk about? So that's a situation that will be dealt with on the basis of the circumstances that would have prevailed in that particular place. But as for setting a standard in terms of what should be taught in what grade and in what time of the year, in terms of the terms of the school calendar, that is something that we are responsible for, that we need to determine. But of course, the development of the children is not the same. They don't grow and understand and advance at the same pace, and you deal with each case as it happens.
So in a situation where there is such an incident or incidents, teachers would then be forced to wholesale or have a whole school approach of that grade, even if it's grade 4 or lower, to intervene and have these discussions. That's what the concession, the Basic Education Department is saying it'll make.
Yes, the training that are provided provides for such eventualities, because they understand that learners come from different...
What training do they undergo?
Well, they undergo training of all types on an ongoing basis in school. It depends on the subject. They have subject advisors who actually go to schools, go to district offices to tell them and monitor if teaching is happening in the right way. That's why monitoring to us is big, because we need to make sure that the curriculum that has been set, we basically make sure that it's implemented. But we also have lesson plans which we monitor. We need to know that day 1 or week 1 of term 1, this is what the learner must know. week 2, this is what the learner must know, and then examine them. Do they know what they're supposed to know? So if they don't, if there are gaps, then the monitoring will pick that up and make sure that there's further training, because sometimes you do pick up that there are delays. A particular teacher maybe is taking long in finishing a particular section. Then you know that there are challenges there. Maybe the teacher is uncomfortable, or they're maybe not well conversant.
And that's what I want to understand. If the global standard is what you mentioned, the UNESCO curriculum, and you take two different societies such as America and South Africa, where there are cultural sensitivities about certain things, including respecting diversity in sexual education or orientation. How do you ensure that you standardize it to make sure that, of course, we are world class in how advanced we are with our teaching programs, but at the same time that it's culturally sensitive? Yeah,
that's why they are guidelines, they are not regulations. It's something we look at, and we look at our own circumstances and try to work within those parameters. We are not supposed to follow word for word whatever they've
What
given
are our
us.
standard parameters then?
Well, we take into account the diversity of our cultural situation in South Africa, and we make sure that our learners' circumstances and their backgrounds is taken into account, because we are different here, and a lot of people, there are religious factors as well that we need to take into account. So we bring, that's why these things we do with consultation, it takes so long.
So how far is your consultation? That's why I'm trying to get you at, Elijah. Just tell us, how far are you with that consultation? Times have changed, and I mean, there was an uproar at some point when there was a discussion of family planning at primary school, the use of the introduction of condoms. People were saying children are too young, but then the evidence then tells us differently, that we have young children who are already sexually active.
You're correct. We consult widely experts, communities, school governing bodies, parents, and other civil organizations, civil society organizations. We make sure that whatever we put down on paper as a policy or as regulation or as content for a textbook would have gone through those processes, right through Parliament and wherever else that we need to go.
Can you give us specifics? Tell us grade 4, what are we looking at the moment? For anybody who doesn't know, who's confused.
Okay, grade 4, we're talking about respect for self, respect for others, the concept of privacy, identifying behaviors that could cause harm to yourself and other people, also identifying dangerous circumstances that could harm you. We try to make sure that these learners are aware of the environment around them so that they don't cause harm to themselves and others. So those are the things that we're talking about. We're talking about issues like smoking, like crossing the road while you are on your cell phone. Those are dangerous activities that a learner at that age, or any other age, by the way, should not be doing.
So once again, if they're precocious, you would then re-look at the curriculum and then upgrade them, so to speak, in terms of what you're teaching them?
Of course, curriculum is an ongoing project. We will enhance it all the time. That's the process actually that we are busy with right now. It was never like this. We had to look at it. In fact, we got a team to go conduct research and say, we need to enhance this particular subject. How do we do that? Go out, conduct research, talk to people, come back with a set of recommendations that we need to follow. Give us the report. Let's study it. Let's debate it. And on that basis, it was agreed that we need to make certain adjustments. And that's what we've done now.
Have you laid a complaint against the Sunday Times journalists and the Sunday Times yet?
No, we must wait and see what we're issuing tomorrow to produce further evidence that it was wrong. The people that is
well, you might as well share some of it now, because
the people that he spoke to, some of them worked on the project in the first phase, and then they were never there. So whatever they told him is old information. A lot has changed since then. So they spoke to him on the basis of old information, and he didn't contact us to get the latest. He made a mistake there. Of course, we'll be giving a clear breakdown of what is taught in term 1 in grade 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, up until 12 to show how wrong that article was. And as for the further steps, we'll take that. Today we're busy dealing with the media, inquiries, doing interviews, clarifying these things.
Is there any school governing body, any learner that could contradict the basic or the Department of Basic Education by saying that they have encountered masturbation or lessons around it at an earlier stage than when you say you do start it? I think you said grade 7?
Yeah, the material we're talking about is what will be used from next year. It's not available at the moment.
At what grade?
From grade 7 upwards.
So there's no one that could contradict you at this point, that the Sunday Times could hold on to and say, this is why we stand by our story?
Well, they might have encountered it possibly in a conversation with a teacher, but not in a textbook.
All right, thank you very much for speaking to us. Basic Education Department spokesperson Elijah Mhlanga. Unfortunately, as I mentioned earlier on, the Sunday Times was unable to join us for the discussion. However, they say they stand by their story. More coming up.